Welcome to the final panel discussion of this Legacy Conference. Much of the talk at a gathering such as this focuses on practicing the Moore method or some other form of inquiry-based learning in courses in the curriculum of majors in mathematics. Yet many, if not most of us, spend the majority of our time in service courses with students captive not to their desire to learn mathematics, but to the requirements of their non-mathematics majors. Can IBL be practiced effectively in such settings? If not, this discussion might be the briefest on record. If so, however, what advice can our panelists offer to the rest of us as we strive to make our service courses into venues where our students not only acquire the mandated knowledge and develop the necessary skills, but also, if they're not extremely vigilant, actually enjoy the mathematics? Let's find out. Our panelists are Christine Fawn-Renessa of Westfield, Massachusetts State University, Elwood Parker of Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina, and Michael Starbird of the University of Texas here in Austin. Because our time is so short, we might not get many opportunities for questions from the audience. If you have a question for one of the panelists and you don't get a chance to ask it during this session, please feel free to email any one of the four of us, and you will get at least a discussion started on it. Without any further ado, I'll turn the microphone over to Christine.
Thank you so much. I want to try to be brief. There's so much we could talk about this. We could take hours on it. So I'm at a small school. Westfield has about 4,500 students. We do a lot of teacher prep. So I have two areas where I've used inquiry-based learning the most. One is in math for liberal arts courses, and one is in training future teachers. Both audiences, it works really well to teach with IBL, but you have to modify a little bit what you are doing. The regular Moore method as it is would not work. Mostly because the emotional components have to be taken care of. A lot of the students that I work with, for the teachers about 80–90%, for the others maybe half of them, are completely terrified of math. So if you send them up to the board and say, do this proof, I'm not going to let you sit down before you do it, that's not going to fly. So there's a lot of different work that needs to be done around it. So one aspect for the math for liberal arts students is that you need to have a good curriculum. That's, in my experience, if you work with something that the students are not interested in, that doesn't grab them, you don't have a chance. It doesn't really matter what you teach them, which is funny and weird, right? But it's their terminal course. So if I teach them how to use quadratic equations for something, they're not going to use it, they're not going to care. So I might as well use something that's really interesting to them. So I may be a connection to music and dancing, maybe a connection to games, maybe a connection to some application that they're interested in, maybe telling them about the millennium problems and that you can actually make money with mathematics, something that, that they're like, whoa, really? That's so cool, I had no idea, something that gets them into it. And so at my school, my colleagues Julian Flair and Phil Hotchkiss, Volker Eck, and I have been developing curriculum materials that we have been testing over the last years. It was an NSF project. It's called Discovering the Art of Mathematics. If you Google that and my name, you'll find all the materials. They're free. So that's something, if you want to look at, that has really worked well for us. It goes in conjunction with the stuff that Mike Starbird is working on. He has this book, The Heart of Mathematics, which is similar, but his book doesn't have, our materials has question after question after question. So you can actually go and just read off the questions, while this one is more descriptive. So but both of them together or either way work really well with that audience. Yeah, and we have tons of experience with that, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. For the future teachers, I would say the most expertise that I have is in trying to teach people how to teach inquiry-based. So that's funny, right? Like you do like how can I teach in an inquiry-based way someone else how to teach inquiry-based? And that's something that I've been trying to wrap my head around. And be like, okay, what do I have to put in place so that they get the content, but they also get how to teach it? And I'm especially working with elementary school teachers in the field and also pre-service teachers, and trying to set up classrooms where that's happening. And we've had really good success with that. The course that I'm doing right now, we're taking the students into the classroom once a week. So they plan, they teach, they try it out, they fail, they think about it, they try to solve the problem, they go back next week and they try again. That is teaching inquiry-based, right? And then after that semester, a lot of them come back to me and say, well, I have so much more confidence now in teaching mathematics and in knowing what works and what doesn't work. And the teachers are very appreciative because the students just thrive from the attention. We have 25 students, they have 25 kids. It's a one-on-one attention that they get, which is in itself beneficial no matter what happens. Just having that for an hour a week is already beneficial to the kids, no matter what kind of math they did. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say for now. So if you have any questions about that part too, I could talk on this for 5 hours, so I won't.
Christine has been true to her word. We do have time for a question or two for her before we move on.
Maybe we should first speak.
There's one. I see one.
Yes, ma'am. Microphone?
Not really a question, but a request. Could you repeat the website that you were saying you could go to?
If you Google Discovering the Art of Mathematics,
Okay.
and my name, and you'll find it.
Thank you.
All right, it's been suggested by the panelists that we save all the questions for the end. So I'm still going to pause when I get up here after each person, just in case you've got something that you can't hold back on. But not seeing a hand right now, I'm going to move on to Elwood.
I'm at Guilford College, which is half the size of Westville, so small, liberal arts, undergraduate only, long-standing history of attempts at all sorts of forms of IBL, 50 years of it now, and still admit that I don't know what I'm doing. For us, service course, we actually, when we add those up and enrollment in it, we include calculus, first 2 semesters of calculus in that, since we have a very small number of majors. And that composes 85 to 90% of the students we teach each semester. So we know how important it is, and then we put lots of effort into it. The main parts of that of our service courses are our math and liberal arts, which is not really serving students toward a major or a particular specialty, but I hope it's serving them in some more important ways in terms of altering their attitudes about mathematics and getting a better understanding of what's involved in mathematics. But our biggest service is actually in elementary statistics, and I've talked about that in previous conferences here and experimented with it, and I'll say a little bit about that before I get through now. And so I'm going to reflect on a few things on those two, math for the liberal arts course we have and elementary statistics. I think that in both of those, there's some crucial factors, and it has to do with student attitudes and what they come in with. The language we use at Guilford is we have the mathematically anxious. There's lots of that, and that's particularly true in the math elementary school, math liberal arts course. I have on occasion walked in the first day and the first question I've asked is, how many of you dislike mathematics? And the last time I did that, I had 21 students, and all but 3 of them raised their hands. And that was on purpose because I wanted to get that on the table. And I think that's important for them to realize, first of all, they're not alone, and it also tells me that there's a challenge here and we have to deal with that. I follow that up not with the why question, that is, why do you dislike mathematics, but what is it about mathematics that you dislike? And that's a different question and elicits different responses, I find, and we try to then, I try to go from there in terms of what I get. I won't comment on some of the examples right now, but there's been some interesting kinds of responses to that. The other thing we do relative to that, to the mathematically anxious, and this is something that Rudy Gord, a colleague of mine for a long time, a Moore legacy, and also a practitioner of IBL type instruction, came up with. He and I as well adopted in this particular course, have the students as the first assignment for the second class write a personal history of mathematics, their own personal history of what they have, 3 or 4 pages of this, and try to make them take it seriously. And then, of course, it does 2 things. It brings to their minds what they have experienced in the past, but it also gives us lots of information about the students that we have before us, and I think that is very crucial at this level in particular. The other first assignment that I use in math for liberal arts, and Rudy does something similar, is to try to find a problem to give them to work on. And I will admit, to borrowing from Mike and Ed's book and lots of others, my actual favorite in this was actually mentioned yesterday, and I said Kearnsburg Bridge problem. And give that to them. They don't think of it initially as being a mathematics problem. And the assignment is not so much to come up with a solution, although we're happy to have one, and we'll tell them that, but to say, as you are working on this problem, pay attention to what you are trying to do, what approaches you are taking to it, and bring those back to class. Of course, what I get from that particular one is a heck of a lot of experimentation. And that's a good place to start. I mean, we do that as mathematicians to begin with. We experiment with the questions that we have to try to see what the examples give us and so forth. So, but the crucial part of that is to find the right kind of questions, and I think Christine just really said this in some sense. Our language at Guilford is we've got to find the right kinds of ways to sneak up on the students. So that they don't think they're doing mathematics or anything that. And so you got to stay away from quadratic equations and stuff like that. And over the years, we've got a reasonably good collection of things that seem to work. But the other thing we find out is that they don't always work. Let me say a little bit about the elementary statistics, and then I got a couple of comments. The other attitude that we find in our students is what we've labeled mathematical boredom. They've had mathematics. They can do it for the most part. They manipulate stuff and do it correctly and all of this, but they don't like it. It's no fun. As a matter of fact, you ask them about it now, man, why they don't like mathematics. It's no fun. And we get a lot of that in our elementary statistics course. They're there, and they're there for one reason. I just got to get credit for this because my major requires it. And so somehow or another you have to find some ways to overcome that. I don't have any real answers to that. The other difficulty I have in elementary statistics is that I have such a wide range of both attitudes toward mathematics and abilities and backgrounds. I have the mathematically anxious sitting in the same class with students who have had calculus. And that's a big range to try to find the right places so that you can engage all of them. But I've experimented. We've been teaching the elementary statistics at Guilford now probably for about 30 years. And about 6, 7 years ago, I decided I was going to try to go as much as I could toward IBL type things. And so the first thing I did is not use a textbook. I bothered a lot of students, by the way. They expected one. And put together a set of notes. And what I was doing was quasi, semi-IBL. Some people probably even call it pseudo-IBL. The missing ingredient was not a lot of presentation by the students, partly because of the size of the classes, but also because of the wide variety of students that I had in there and the abilities to do something that was presentable. As a matter of fact, just this past year went through a review process for tenured faculty. That'll be the last one of those I do. One of my colleagues sat in on the elementary statistics class I was teaching, and he commented at the end, he said, everybody in the class contributed to what was going on, that is vocally, except one person. And I said, yeah, that's a big success. So even though they're not going to the board, they sort of benchmark there is to get as many of them as you can involved in what the thinking is on whatever the particular topic and subject or question we're trying to answer. And that's the way I measure a lot of success in that. But that then takes it away from what is a very, very important part of IBL, that is IBL, the presentation. Now, my experience with this, and I've sort of kept track, it's anecdotal information, but there's some data there, is that what happens with my elementary statistics classes in this mode is that roughly quarters. A quarter of them get out of there in a hurry. I have an opportunity usually to talk with them as they get out there. I need my signature, they used to at least. And so I'll ask them why they're getting out, and I don't want to do it this way. That's not what I'm used to, and I try to talk them out of that. And I do get some who say, I don't think I can do this. And I certainly say, yes, you can, give yourself a chance. But I lose about a quarter early on. So I start with maybe a couple of dozen, and so you can count down with me. The second quarter are those who stay with it, but want the more traditional kind of experience they've had in mathematics. That is, they want me to show them how to do problems, and then, interestingly enough, they're not as satisfied when the other students show them and I don't show them, so as they would be, I gather, if I did show them how to do them. And then they want me to give them a couple dozen of them from the work and check them, and then they want me to ask if it's something of the same nature on the test. That's what they've done. That's what they want. Well, they stay with it, and I've got the course set up so that they can succeed in terms of getting the credit, and that's really all they want to start with. So that's another quarter. The third quarter are those who do indeed buy in to figuring stuff out for themselves, but are not very good at it, and recognize that and have some difficulties. And then the other quarter are the ones that are really delightful to have. Not only do they buy in, but they're there. I mean, I have had some of these students come up with the formulas that give you the probabilities in a hypergeometric for a hypergeometric random variable, and so forth, which is very pleasing. And so those successes sort of keep me alive in this. but I'd like to have more of that type of thing actually happen. Let me make one other comment, and then Mike can make his, and we'll see what time we've got left. I'm convinced that IBL, whether it be quasi, semi, hopefully not pseudo, is the right way to go with these students when they have these kinds of attitudes. That it has a good opportunity to change enough of them to make it worth doing, and it won't harm the others. That much I'm pretty much convinced of. The things I don't know, and I keep experimenting with, are how far to take it. That is, how pure I can make the kind of approach. And I continue to try to experiment with that. I'm also, and I hope this group can do some work on this, because in whatever time I have before I retire, this is where most of my focus, I hope, is going to be, is that I've become convinced that these service courses, let's say below calculus, that the students may have to take for various requirements or for a college-wide requirement, that the standard way of going in and having them redo what they didn't do well the first time and do it at a faster pace and maybe a little bit more of it and maybe at some kind of different level doesn't work for the majority of them. And so I think there are some things that we can do that will help them learn how to think, and that's what's going to last anyhow. It's not the details and the algorithmic process that are going to last unless they use them all the time, but to think more clearly and more logically and so forth. So I hope we'll find a way in this group to work on what will really serve the students in a longer lasting vein than what's actually happening in most places now. And we're going to try to do that at Guilford, I hope. And I may be calling on some of you for some help. Thank you.
Mike.
Well, thank you very much. The first thing I wanted to say is a couple things that Elwood said, which are, of course, his last point is exactly right. It's a crime that we allow our profession to teach kids high school mathematics again for the 5th time after they didn't get it the first 4 times. It's just a crime. And we do it over and over again. We've been doing it for decades. In the last MAA guide, it was explicitly said that such a thing is a waste of time, and it's time for our profession to wake up and change. Now, that's hard to get things to change, and that's part of our job, is to figure out how that's accomplished. So, Elwood, I wanted to say a couple other things about Elwood's things. One is he said that his kids sometimes he would teach things they wouldn't recognize them as mathematics. And that sort of reminded me of a comment I often get from my liberal arts mathematics course. They come away, they say, boy, I loved all that stuff you did. I still hate math, but I love that stuff, you know. But I take issue with a phrase that he had, which is that he talked about below calculus. Now look, this is my liberal arts math book, The Heart of Mathematics. And by the way, another thing is, I don't give this away. You got to pay a lot. You know, that's good. So none of this free stuff. You know, I don't know. I give away these notes. No, you pay, and they
The students might be able to afford that, mine don't.
The point is that the title of this book, by the way, this is one of the things that has changed my life, was when I was asked by a friend of mine to teach the liberal arts mathematics, to develop a mathematics course for liberal arts students that would actually be valuable to them. There was a program she was the director of. And so I developed this course with my colleague Ed Berger, and we produced this book. And the title is The Heart of Mathematics, but the subtitle is An Invitation to Effective Thinking. The concept is that there's a take-home lesson here. Exactly like, I'm just repeating Elwood's comments. At the end of the day, they are going to forget the mathematics. That's not the lesson here. The lesson that in all of our courses, not just the liberal arts mathematics course or the mathematics course for pre-service teachers, the lesson is, what are they going to keep forever? There's a quote that I love which says, education is what remains after what has been learned has been forgotten. I always ask the question, and it directs day-to-day decisions. What are students going to get from the experience in this course that they're going to keep and use in 20 years? What are they going to keep from that course they're going to use in 30 years? And if the answer is nothing, then we should be doing something different. But if we teach a course in which we actually teach them to think better, then that's something that they're going to use every day of their lives. They're going to face the unknown that they're confronting in their future lives, questions that have never been posed by anybody. Those are the questions we're trying to prepare them to answer. So in my liberal arts mathematics course, I wanted to say, can I really do this? Can I teach people to think better than they can? And so I did an experiment. So one of the features of the course is that we talk about interesting topics, just like Christine was saying. One of the ideas is you've got to actually talk about things that are interesting, that we think are interesting. Well, one of the topics I think is fascinating is infinity, talking about infinity. So we were doing infinity in the class, and I had already explained the idea of one-to-one correspondence, and I said we came up to a difficult theorem. And I'll tell you what it was. It was to prove that there's a one-to-one correspondence between the natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the fractions, all rational numbers. That was the question. Well, you know, this is a liberal arts mathematics course. They're art majors and stuff. And so I wanted to know, I wonder, you know, I was ready to start dealing with this. Could I get them to figure this out for themselves? You know. And so I said, okay, I'll do it in class. And here's what I did. I said, and I do just like, it's an implicit inquiry. It's not really a Moore method. It's implicit in the sense that I'm revealing to them the fact that mathematics is a human development, that it makes sense. It comes from someplace. And by the way, just as an aside, this is a feature of IBL instruction that I don't think we emphasize enough. That is that if you are presenting the material in an order in which they can discover ideas on their own, you're forced to present it so that the genesis of each idea is evident. The traditional lecture method often just starts in the middle of the story. This is the definition, this is the theorem statement, and now here's the proof, rather than saying, well, where did it come from, so that it makes logical sense to have gotten there. And IBL forces one to do that because you have to build the building blocks. Well, in any case, so in talking about infinity, I was trying to say this one-to-one correspondence. I knew that this was it's a difficult thing. They couldn't do this. And so here's what I did. I said, okay, show me that there's a one-to-one correspondence. We talked about this before. One-to-one correspondence between the natural numbers and the rational numbers. This is way too hard. I said this. It's way too hard. You can't do this. Take 1 minute and write down your answer. Figure it out. Talk to your neighbor. So they talk to their neighbor. I walk around as I do. This is my version of this in this kind of a class. It's a big class. I walk around. They're talking to each other. How we're trying this. And I said, there's only one rule. You have to write down an attempt. It's not good enough just to say, I can't do it. I know they can't do it. I said, you have to write down an answer, an attempt. After a minute, or actually 2 or 3 minutes, I pointed to somebody. I said, Mary, tell me what you have. And she said, I didn't get it. I said, I know you didn't get it. It's too hard. And I said, tell me what you have. And she said, no, it's wrong. I said, I know it's wrong. Tell me what you have. People are conditioned not to make mistakes in public. They're conditioned to do this. And I said, tell me what you have. It took about 4 iterations. Finally, she told me what she had, and here's what she had. 1 was 1 over 1, 2 was 1 over 2, 3 was 1 over 3, 4 was 1 over 4, and so on. And I said, I wrote it on the board, and I said, you're right, it's wrong. And she said, I know it's wrong. She was quite annoyed. And then I said, okay, why is it wrong? And she said, why is it wrong? Duh. Not all the fractions occur, that you don't get to them. And I said, is there any specific one that's wrong? And she said, yeah, 2/3. Never going to be there. I said, could you put 2/3 on the list? And she said, yeah, I could do that. I could just put it right after 1/3 before I could do that. And I said, take another minute. And I said, then are you done? And she said, no. I said, okay, take another minute and do all you can. And she took another minute. The whole class, of course, now working on it. After 2 minutes, they said, she said, I said, Mary, always, back to the same person. Mary, did you do it? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, read it out. And she said, okay, 1, 1/2, 1/3, 2/3, 1/4, 3/4, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5. And I said, wow, okay, I wrote it down on the board. I said, are you done? Have you got it? She said, yes. Another kid in the class said, no, it's not done. And she said, what? He said, no, it's not done. He said, you don't have the fractions or the bigger numbers on the top. You don't have the improper fractions. She said, oh. She said, shoot. Or words to that effect. And I said, well, can you fix it? Take another 3 minutes. Can you fix it? And she did. She did after 3 minutes. After she saw it. To put the reciprocal after each one. Put the reciprocal after each one. She fixed it, and she said, now I said, do you have it? Do you have it? She said, yes. Another kid. Wait a minute. How about the negative ones? Shoot again. Take another minute. She got that one instantly. Able to finish it. She finished after 4 iterations. She was able to do this. And the interesting thing was, this is not, of course, the standard method of proof of this theorem. The proof that's in this book here is the canonical way. You put it in an array and go through in a spiral. She didn't do that way. And I was saying to myself, this is a powerful event. I got her to be able to prove something in mathematics, and I know I wasn't winking or something to get her the right ideas, because she didn't come up with the method of proof that I myself would have said, the one that was in my mind. She came up with a new proof. And all I said to her was, make a mistake. See what's wrong with it. Can you correct it? Make a mistake again, a specific one. Correct it. Make a mistake again. This was a method of thinking. I didn't give her any mathematical hint. All I did was teach her how to think better, and it was ideas that she could teach herself. I didn't have to be there telling her what to do. So this was a strategy of thinking. And to me, it was such a powerful experience because it showed me that we can actually teach people how to think better. We can teach them how to learn how to think better. And my co-author and I mean, one of the things in this book is that we have what we call life lessons, which are the lessons that aren't mathematical. Things like this idea of making mistakes, learning from failure. Don't avoid the mistake, but learn from it. And then we've now written another book, The 5 Elements of Effective Thinking, that really just capture what the goal is when we say we really want people to learn how to think. That's what we're trying to teach them. But what does that mean? It means that we want to teach them to understand things deeply. We want them to raise questions. We want them to make mistakes and learn from their mistakes. We want them to see the flow of ideas. There are specific techniques that we use as a matter of habit in mathematics, and we can be explicit about them and make them the center of courses. And I have found, now that I do this in my liberal arts mathematics course, that they come away being able to apply this kind of strategy of thinking to things outside of mathematics. Their final project is Mathematics as Metaphor, where I ask them to apply not the mathematics, but the techniques of thinking to some topic that is something they actually care about, and it may not be about mathematics. And they talk about personal relationships, they talk about government, they talk about big issues of war and peace, and they talk about mostly, personal matters, how to succeed in school. And they can apply these techniques of learning to understand simple things deeply, making mistakes, seeing the flow of ideas. These things can color and frame how they can become better people. So when Jonathan Hodge the other night asked I don't know if he posed it as a question or a statement, you are not in the business of teaching mathematics. You're changing lives. You are changing human beings forever. And that is our mission in this project, and it's an important one. Thanks.
I think we're out of time. Thank the panelists, and I thank you in the audience. And we'll now move on to the 5-minute reports.